Yes.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to mute everybody so that we can make sure that we can all hear. Thank you for joining us. We're going to go on a journey through the portion of Eikev. As we do it every time, we're going to do a summary, and then we're going to go through some of the details that we could derive from it practically in our lives today. So the portion begins by saying, BNY stands for B'nai Yisrael, the Jewish people. If B'nai Yisrael, if the Jewish people observe Hashem commandments, they'll be blessed in a multitude of ways. Their Canaanite enemies will be destroyed. Do not fear these enemies. Hashem will miraculously deliver them into your hands. So if we behave well, Hashem will take care of us. Moshe instructs Bnei Yisrael to destroy the idols which they will find in the land of Canaan. Moshe then discusses the many tests and miracles during their 40-year desert ordeal. Remember, Moshe Rabbeinu is giving a very long speech, the whole book of Deuteronomy. He's speaking to the generation that came into the promised land, very distinct from the first four books where he's talking to the generation that came out of Egypt. Now he's at the end of 40 years and he's re-encountering and recounting the events of the past 40 years. So he says, look how many tests and trials and miracles that we had over the last 40 years. Bnei Israel are commanded to bless Hashem after they eat and after they are sated. V'achalta, v'savata, uveirachta. These are words we say in the benching when we do the grace after meal after eating. And we'll come back to discuss this very important instruction to bless Hashem after we have eaten. Then it says, good fortune in the promised land should not lead Bnei Israel to forget their source, which is Hashem. So sometimes when good comes our way, the problems that ensue are from the fact that we become too self-preoccupied and we forget that we have a responsibility to fulfill Hashem's mission. We take things for granted. We shouldn't fall into that failure. Such a blunder would lead to the destruction and to ruin. Then it speaks about the inheritance of the land of Israel is not due to their own merits and righteousness. So it's not as if we earned everything. Hashem chose us, promised us, but it's not as if we have credits that Hashem owes it to us. Rather, it's because of the promise that Hashem made to our forefathers, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, and therefore Hashem is keeping his promise that he made to our parents. Moshe reminds them of the times they angered Hashem, including the time that they sinned with a dance around the golden calf. So Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't hold punches. This is like he's saying farewell. You would think it's a time for diplomatically positive language. Moshe Rabbeinu says it like it is. He says the warts and he says the strengths. Moshe praised Hashem and he saved Bnei Israel from the fate that could have befallen them because they had danced around the golden calf. Hashem commanded Moshe to carve out 2 new replacement tablets of the Ten Commandments. He's recounting the story. Remember, he gave Moshe Rabbeinu 2 tablets. He came down from the mountain, saw them dancing around the golden calf, cast down the tablets, and they were smashed, they were broken. And now Hashem, as a process of healing, says, you now, Moshe Rabbeinu, you take the stones and you hew out the letters. The first came about miraculously. The second was through the effort of Moshe Rabbeinu. Hashem rewards the Levim to be his holy servants, because until that point it was the firstborn in each family that would serve Hashem. But the Levim, the tribe of Levi, was the only tribe that stood completely steadfast and didn't get caught up in the golden calf. And thereafter Hashem said, instead of the servants of Hashem who would represent the Jewish people being the firstborn, they would be transfer their responsibility to the tribe of Levi. We appreciate that Hashem has chosen Bnei Israel to be his treasured nation. Remember the miracles. Always appreciate what Hashem chose you for responsibility. Appreciate it and be grateful. The land of Israel is constantly dependent on Hashem for irrigating rains. We'll come back to this point. How Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu describes the land of Canaan, the promised land, Israel, is different from Egypt, because Egypt doesn't have to worry about rain at all, but Israel does. come back to why that is in fact a blessing. It is constantly under Hashem's watchful eye. Then we have in this week's portion, as opposed to last week when we had the first paragraph of the Shema, this week we have the second paragraph. And we're going to look at the differences between the first and the second paragraph. Observe Hashem's commandments, which will cause Hashem to supply bountiful rainfall and harvests, and God forbid, non-observance will lead to exile. We are commanded regarding prayer, tefillin, mezuzahs, and teaching Torah to our children. If they follow Hashem, they will easily conquer the promised land. So basically, Hashem says you have to commit yourselves to be servants of Hashem, and Hashem will fulfill his promise that he made to our parents. Let's go through some of the details. It says, Eikev tishmuun, and if you will listen to these laws. The name of this week's portion is Eikev, which literally means if you will listen, but in the context it means if you will listen, but literally the word Eikev actually means something else. It means a heel, the heel of a foot. In the biology of a human being, Eikev is the heel. So the Hebrew word Eikev, an uncommon synonym for because or if. Because you will listen, then Hashem will do all these blessings. But it's an uncommon usage of the word. So many see a connection to the word Eikev, which means a heel. What's a heel got to do with this process of listening to Hashem and being rewarded for doing the right thing? So Rashi says that it is referring to the heel because those mitzvahs which a person tramples on with his heels because he thinks they're totally insignificant, be equally diligent with all of Hashem's commandments, no less with those that seem less significant to our finite minds. So Rashi explains Vaya Eikev Tishmun. The word Eikev means if or because you will listen, Hashem will bless you. But why would the word chosen for the word because or if be a word like Eikev, uncommon, and it has a connotation of the heel? It's the same word as the Hebrew word for heel. Rashi's interpretation is, be careful with all the mitzvahs. Listen to Hashem's mitzvahs, even the mitzvahs that relate to your heel, that you might trample on because you think, who really cares? This is not so important. Big mitzvahs that I can relate to, and I see the spirituality, and I see how important it is. Those you have to keep. But the simple mitzvahs that don't seem to have any major issue, I'm not so scrupulous with those. So that's what Hashem's saying. Even the mitzvahs that you might trample on with your heel and think are insignificant, be careful. And one of the analogies or examples that illustrates this is that sometimes we think the sophistication and the wealth and the importance and the cost determines what's important. And simple things are less important because they don't cost us so much and they don't have the sophistication. So I don't know if you remember, in 1986, there was a shuttle. It was called the Challenger. And the whole world, you and I don't know if that time we had it on our phones. We didn't have it on our phones, the latest news. But we saw the image of this rocket ship attached to it, the shuttle. And it had about 59 seconds of flight. And it blew up in front of everyone's eyes. 7 people on board, I think it was. They were all killed immediately. It was a school teacher. It was like very, very tragic and sad that is what happened to the Challenger space shuttle. So they did an evaluation of what happened, what caused the fault that caused the destruction of that rocket ship and the lives that were lost with it. And what they found was it was an O-ring, a ring that acted as a seal between the rocket fuel, the rocket fuel department, the storage for fuel, and the rest of the rocket. And heat and fire got across through an area that should have been sealed, and that blew up the fuel that was there with him. And it's just such an incredible lesson, because billions and billions of dollars were poured into the Challenger program, the shuttle program. There were computers that were breaking all records. There was the use of tiles on the surface of the shuttle that were revolutionary tiles that landed up reaching into industry as well for their being heat resistant. There were computers that were the most sophisticated computers in the world. And on what did this whole mission fail, and the loss of lives and the blow up of the Challenger rocket ship in 1986? It was because of an O-ring that you could almost buy in your home wares supply store, in your local hardware store, in builders. You could buy this O-ring, and it is something of very simple form. Doesn't cost a lot. Very simple thing. But it was essential. It was a little detail that was the difference between success and failure of all the other equipment that was worth billions of dollars. It's just an example of how when we look with our own minds, we think the only important things are the expensive things, the sophisticated things, the things that are hard to come by. But the little details that just float around and we often trample on because they're so familiar and so seemingly insignificant, be careful. Because if this is Hashem's plan, and he says, do this little detail, don't become the author of what is important. Hashem says what's important. And the little things and the big things are important. And you don't start taking into your own hands a priority list of what you think is important and what you can throw out. Sometimes the little things cement a relationship. And we say the right things, and we talk and we share simple things from husband to wife. They are significantly important issues, not just taking your husband or your wife on a cruise around the world that's going to cost megabucks to show that you love. Sometimes it's a very simple thing. That's caring and showing compassion and listening and doing a favor of the simplest form. And that's what holds a relationship together as well. Particularly when it comes to Hashem, and he gives us the recipe of 613 commandments, we shouldn't be the authors to say, you know what, this one is important and this one not so. Eikev tishmun, even the mitzvahs that you crush with your heel because you think they're so small and unimportant are vital. The Ibn Ezra and Nachmanides says, Eikev doesn't only mean the heel, but just as the heel is the end, the edge of the human body, right at the bottom, so likewise in time, the end refers to the reward being something that follows the action. Vaya Eikev, the end of what you do, the result of what you do is going to be the blessings. So it is what follows your actions and your deeds and your being compliant with Hashem's desire. Vaya Eikev, as a result of that, the end that will come out of living this positive lifestyle is going to be all the rewards that are promised. The Baal HaTurim says that the word Eikev is into gematria often, has the same numerical value of 172, which is the amount of words in the Ten Commandments. It's telling us, Vaya Eikev, why use a strange word? Because it has an allusion to the Ten Commandments. Moving on. So it says, Vaya Eikev Tishmun, if you'll keep these mitzvahs, if you'll listen to these mitzvahs. So the Tzemach Tzedek, which is the third Chabad Rebbe, said that the word Eikev, which means a heel, also means the end of time. Ikvasa de Mashiach, the generation of the heels of Moshiach. So what does it mean? They are the spiritually lowest generation due to the descent of the generations. As generations move further and further away from Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and Moshe Rabbeinu, so we become less and less and less sensitive to Yiddishkeit, to the word of Hashem. As time goes by, we become much, much more coarse in our approach to spirituality. We don't see ourselves as having developed. In fact, we are a shadow of the greatness of our parents and forefathers. So it's saying, it is in the generation in which the footsteps of Mashiach can already be heard, right at the end of time, the lowest generation, we have a capacity to elicit the greatest blessings to the world. This is the generation that will listen to these laws. As the Maimonides Rambam says, the Torah has already promised that the people of Israel will ultimately return to Hashem at the end of their exile. and will be immediately redeemed. So Vaya Eikev Tishmaun, the generation that lives at the edge of time, the end of time, right before Mashiach arrives, namely us, will have the capacity to bring phenomenal blessings into the world, even more so than the generations that preceded us. What is so important about the heel of the human anatomy? The Rebbe says the Torah should permeate every aspect of our being. So for our head to sense godliness, relatively easy because it's profound and it understands. For our hearts, it has the capacity to sense and to feel. But the rest of our physical body is much coarser. And of all the parts of the body, the most coarse is the foot, the heel, that is able to walk on nails or even heat. Once the CSO persuaded me to be part of their training course, and we walked on glowing fires because somehow the heel of the foot is able to withstand much more than we think that it can. So listen to these laws and observe them and does them. So the Eikev of the Mashiach, the end generations just before Mashiach, seemingly not as sensitive as the brains of the forefathers and the hearts of our ancestors. But we have a capacity to withstand the pain and the challenges of galut, of exile, and to fulfill Hashem's will anyway. So this is a quick thought that he says in the verse that when Moshe Rabbeinu describes the manna that God fed us with as we traversed the desert, it says, Vayancha vayarivecha vayachilcha et haman, Hashem afflicted you, he caused you to suffer and to hunger, and then he fed you the manna. Leman, in order to make you know that man does not live by bread alone. So Hashem tests us. So he made us suffer and then he gave us manna. So Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was asked by his disciples, why didn't the manna come down once a year? Imagine if Hashem would make a big deposit into our bank account of manna for 365 days, we wouldn't have to worry about going out every single day to collect it. We would have storage houses and we'd be able to supply ourselves throughout the year without worrying if anything happened, because we've got enough backup power. So we say no, that Hashem did not do that. Perhaps no manna will come down tomorrow and then we'll all die of hunger. So they were found to turn their attention to Hashem all the time. It's like the analogy of a parent who really wants to spend time with their son or with their daughter, and they give them a huge sum of money, and the kid goes off into the sunrise, and is secure to live for many, many months. He doesn't even come home because he's got everything she needs. As opposed to a father who says, I'm giving you pocket money for one day. At the end of the day, the kid has to come home because otherwise he doesn't have money for tomorrow. So here, there's a constantly fresh relationship of dependency and supply. Hashem gives us, provides for us, and we constantly in need. So we never feel smug. We never feel self-sufficient and not requiring the assistance from above. Hashem kept us on the edge so that we would always recognize from whence our sustenance comes. So that was like a daily dependency, a daily fix, and a daily connection to Hashem. We never ever put our noses up and said, who cares? I'm okay for the rest of the year. I don't have to have anything to do with Hashem now. I've got everything I need for the next while. We needed to keep our relationship fresh every single day of our lives. And it says, bread from heaven instilled a recognition that no matter how much a person toils to earn his livelihood, he receives no more and no less than what has been allocated to him or allotted to him from above. So even today we have this constant dependency. There is a blessing in being regularly and constantly dependent on Hashem, because when we're dependent, we turn to Hashem and we daven. We recognize that our relationship depends on Hashem providing us. But when we become smug and we think we can make it alone, then we get arrogant, and then we forget Hashem, and then we walk away. So it's actually a blessing that Hashem gave us to be constantly dependent, because it keeps the relationship always on the boil, always a discussion about the relationship. Bread from heaven instilled the recognition that no matter how much a person toils in his livelihood, so you could think that you will work extra hard, and then you'll become rich. Hashem wants you to provide for yourself and for your family, and then also to daven and also to learn Torah. And if you think that you're going to get rid of all the other important things in your life and work excessively and not have a relationship and not have children, not have a family because you're just completely committed to making money, let's say, and there are such people in the world, so that's not a blessing. That is a tremendous pain. Bread from heaven, yeah, we already said, constantly dependent on Hashem. So now we got this thing that he afflicted us, and then he made us hungry, and then he gave us the manna. The question is, why would Hashem do that? And what was the affliction? So the Gemara says the affliction was twofold. Firstly, that no person ever, so a continuation of what you just said before, ever had enough to be able to look in the mirror in the morning and say, I'm really grateful I have everything I need. Because there was nothing in the cupboard for tomorrow. When a person lives and you know that I have what I need for today, but I have no idea how I'm going to survive tomorrow, and I'm dependent on Hashem, so that was an affliction. That was, in a sense, an affliction that came with the manna that nobody could have a savings account. Nobody could put away for tomorrow. Every day was dependent on Hashem. So that, in a sense, was an affliction. Not that Hashem first afflicted us and then gave us the manna. The manna was given in a way that was an affliction. That's what the Gemara says. But on a deeper level, that it says that Hashem afflicted us. So the commentaries explain that Hashem afflicted us so that we would be ready to receive the manna. Because if everything was going so rosy and well, and we were eating to our heart's content, and we were still able to go to a different restaurant every night and order the best, finest menus of all the different delicacies that are served in the, and then Hashem would have said, I've got this porridge called manna, and when you eat it, you can sustain yourself. So the guy coming out of a T-bone steak, well done, with all of the side dishes that he makes his heart so glad. If a person is in that state, and Hashem says, you know, I'll take that away from you and I'll give you manna instead, what would we have said? We would have said, we don't need that, Hashem. We're quite happy to have steak and chips every night. We don't need you to give us manna. We'll manage on our own. But that would be foolhardy, because the night that you go to the restaurant, you can eat and order whatever you want. But the next night, you're going to be in the desert, and the next, and 10 weeks later, and a month later, and months later, and years later, you are walking through the desert. If Hashem didn't give us manna, we could never survive. It was a miracle of sustenance that enabled us to traverse the whole desert. So Hashem causes us to suffer. He breaks down our familiar source of revenue and source of food. And when we are broken because we have nothing, we turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, please. And then we are grateful to get the manna. And when we get the manna, it's a method of survival for 40 years in the desert. All of our solutions of having magnificent decor at the fanciest restaurant and thinking that that is the ultimate in life. So if Jews left Egypt with a satchel full of steaks, they wouldn't have made it through the desert. Hashem starved us of our steaks. He said that I'm not going to give you and you're going to be hungry. And then when I come by and I say, do you want my manna? We'd say, please, we're desperate. We're so hungry. So this is about letting go of our familiar sources of sustenance, of revenue, of security, and then reaching for something that immediately, as you look at it, it's a descent. It's less than. You can't compare manna to a beautiful steak. So it looks as though it's less than, but ultimately, this is the food that is going to let you traverse the whole desert and keep you alive and give you all the energy and the vitamins and all the things that you need are going to come through the manna. So sometimes we think that we have everything under control. I have my business and I have my work, and there's no real time for Hashem. So Hashem sometimes dismantles things that we think are the source of our sustenance, so that in desperation we turn to Hashem, and then Hashem gives us what we wouldn't have otherwise accepted, because we would have said, I want something a lot more um, beautiful, as in the restaurant, rather than just sloppy porridge, which looks the same. So we would have denied ourselves of a means of surviving in the desert. So sometimes Hashem takes away what we're familiar with to give us something that we're not familiar with. We think it's a loss, but ultimately it's the biggest gain. So then Moshe Rabbeinu says that Hashem describes the land, and he says, "Loi keret Mitzrayim." This is the land of Israel is not like the land of Egypt, where you sowed your seed and watered it by foot, like a vegetable garden. Rather, it drinks water of the rain of heaven. So Moshe Rabbeinu praises the land of Israel and says, this land of Israel is not like Egypt. Egypt, a guy could with his foot maneuver the lip or the direction of the canal and water kilometers and kilometers of produce. Where did the water come from? It came from the Nile. And in the Nile Delta, the ancient Egyptians would build canals that would take the water to wherever it needed to go, shadufs, which were a method of pulling up water and then pushing it to the other side and letting the water out over the plants. So there were irrigation systems which Egypt had, and they were so smug and self-content because they never had to worry. They never had to go to the end of their farm in the early morning and turn their hands and heads up to Hashem and say, Hashem, help me. I don't know how I'm going to make it. Because everything was there. The water came down every single year. The Nile was in flood. They didn't have to pray for rain. It was automated. They had everything they needed automatically. Moshe Rabbeinu says this land, the promised land, is not like the land of Egypt, where you simply have a river that floods every single year and gives water to all of the crops and all of the sustenance. No. This land is not like Eretz Mitzrayim, Egypt, that was miraculously able to sustain itself from the Nile. But rather, this land of Israel is going to be dependent on the rain. And dependent on the rain means that you're going to have to turn to Hashem and say, please, my Father in heaven, help me, because I'm desperate. And then when Hashem will supply, there's a relationship between ourselves and Hashem. So again, just like the manner we spoke about before, and we spoke about generally being dependent on Hashem, and that is an advantage for our formula of living, that we recognize the place that Hashem has in our lives. Over here we're saying that the land itself is different to Egypt. Different from Egypt because in Egypt they simply had canals of ready-made water that would flood down from the river, and it would service all of their needs every single year without fail. Israel's not like that. It's not like Egypt where you're going to have water coming automatically. You're going to have to daven for rain. And I remember Mr. Madali, one of the great founders and fathers of our Great Park community and all the way back to the days in Walmart. And he was a farmer, and he used to say that no matter how much you've worked and no matter how brilliant your computerized drip irrigation, whatever you've got on your farm to make it work, there's a moment where you go out and you sit at the end of your farm, you put your eyes up to heaven, and you say, please, Hashem, help, because I can't do it on my own. That is a beautiful accountability and dependency that keeps a relationship fresh all the time. Moshe Rabbeinu says, this land we're going into is not like Egypt where it's automatic. This is now dependent on a relationship. Hashem can withhold rain or give rain, and we need to do the right thing to be worthy of Hashem giving us the rain. Moving on. Okay, maybe we can come back to this, a little bit complicated. So we have in this week's Parsha the mitzvah of benching. So we know that we say brachas. In fact, the Gemara says that we say 100 blessings every single day. And we can count up. If a man goes to shul and he says blessings of the brachot in the morning, and then he davens his Amidah where there's 18 or 19 blessings, and he says Amen when the Chazan repeats it, and the same thing happens at Mincha. Every time he answers Amen, it's as if he said a blessing. So we constantly saying blessings in this world. Where do we get it from? That before we have an apple, we need to say bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz, because we're eating fruit of the tree and we're making a blessing. Where do we know it from? The Torah says nothing about making a blessing before we eat. The wording in the verse is that you will eat and you'll be satisfied, and then you will bless Hashem. You will express gratitude to Hashem for the food that He has given you. So that is where we know that we bless Hashem, because it says, acknowledge Hashem for the gift that He's given you. So the Gemara says, if you have to say a bracha after you've eaten and you're full, for sure, when you're vulnerable and you haven't yet eaten, it's important to talk to Hashem and say, please, Hashem, I'd like to have an apple, rather than the after blessing. So the after blessing is the only mandated blessing in the Torah. There's one other. There's a blessing that we say when we go up to the Torah. When we get called up to the Torah, we say blessing. That blessing is also from Hashem and relates to our spiritual sustenance. We're saying thank you, Hashem, for your Torah. And when we eat, we say a blessing beforehand, because if Hashem told me to do it after, when I'm full, for sure when I'm hungry, I should say bracha. We say blessing before, and we say a blessing after, not because Hashem needs us to praise Him and say, Hashem, you're such a great God. We don't add or take away one iota from Hashem. But we need to. We are the ones that need to know what it means to express appreciation, to acknowledge, and to count our blessings. When we become, again, just self-indulged, and we think that the world owes us everything, we have miserable lives. We are much better off when we are alert and open to constantly be grateful for anything that happens in our lives from anybody, and all-encompassing when it comes from Hashem, who gives us food and clothing and everything that we need. We should say thank you. We should say the blessing after, and we should even say the blessing before to say, please Hashem, can I partake of this apple? And then when I've finished eating, there's an after bracha. We just said that the Torah tells us we should actually make 100 blessings a day, and it's taken from a verse in this week's portion that says, V'ata Yisrael, na Yisrael, ma Hashem Elokecha, what does Hashem ask of you? And the word ma is very similar to the word me'ah, which means 100. So the verse is actually saying, 100 Hashem is asking of you this day. That when you, each time you partake of something that is beneficial to you, stop, pause, think, and thank Hashem from whence it comes. Not because Hashem needs that, but that we need to live a life of gratitude, and expressing thanks to Hashem is something that changes our lives. It doesn't change Hashem in any way. It's not certainly nothing that we could make Hashem grow as a result of our activities. Our activities that we do make us grow, make us develop. Maybe we'll come back to the second half of it, a little bit complicated. So now, Moshe Rabbeinu turns to the Jewish people and says, V'ato, and now Yisrael, my people Israel, Ma Hashem Elokecha shel me'imach. What is Hashem asking of you? Ki im liyira. All that Hashem is asking of you is to fear Hashem. So what are you thinking that you're so overwhelmed and that you're worried? It's a cinch. Hashem just wants us to ask of you that we should fear Hashem. So the Gemara asks the question, V'chi milsa, yira milsa zutrasihi, is fear really a minor thing? The fear of Hashem is something that could take a lifetime to really develop and allow it to affect all the aspects of our lives. So that has to be worked on. We have to develop ourselves. We have to allow ourselves to grow. People might spend a lifetime working on proper fear of Hashem. So what does it mean that in the verse, what's Hashem asking of us? It's the easiest thing. It's not so easy. And the Gemara answers something which makes it even more complicated. The Gemara answers, yes, for Moshe Rabbeinu it was easy. Moshe Rabbeinu was on such a high level that whatever yira, fear of God that was required, Moshe Rabbeinu found it so easy to get there because it was just so second nature to him. So don't ask me, why does Hashem call it easy when it's so hard for me? The Gemara answers, yeah, for you it might be hard, but for Moshe Rabbeinu it was very easy because of who Moshe Rabbeinu was. But then the question obviously on that is, what kind of answer is that? Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't talking to himself, he was talking to the Jewish people. He said, Va'ata Yisrael, and you, my people Israel, what is Hashem asking of you? The fact that it's easy for Moshe Rabbeinu is almost irrelevant, because Hashem's not talking about his relationship with Hashem. He's talking to Va'ata Yisrael, you, my people Israel. And he makes out as if for my people Israel it's easy. And the Gemara's answer that for Moshe Rabbeinu it was easy doesn't seem to be relevant, because for the Jewish people it was hard, even if it was easy for Moshe Rabbeinu. So the Gemara, that's what we're saying, it seems incomprehensible. But then we say each and every soul of the house of Israel contains within it something of the quality of our teacher Moshe Rabbeinu. When we say we had a leader, Moshe Rabbeinu, he elicited an element of leadership in each and every one of us. And the more we attached ourselves to Moshe Rabbeinu, we had strengths that were Moshe Rabbeinu's strengths that were imbued to us by our connection to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is one of the 7 shepherds, starting all the way from Abraham Avinu. There were 7 shepherds. Moshe Rabbeinu was the 7th. And he fed the vitality and the godliness to the community of the souls of Israel. So in actual fact, what we're saying is, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, Bnei Israel, it looks so easy for you to do it. We're asking, why was it easy? For Moshe Rabbeinu it was easy, not for us. And we said, yeah, if we attach ourselves to Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't only have fear of God in himself, he imbues it to the people. By being connected to Moshe Rabbeinu, we ourselves have an element of the strength, the unique qualities of Moshe Rabbeinu. A minute particle of his greatness, Moshe Rabbeinu's greatness and light, illuminates every single Jew in each and every generation. It's not possible to do all of them. Let's just find 1 or 2 more. I've mentioned this concept before, that the word pesel means an idol. And Hashem says, pesel, don't make for yourself an idol. Then when Moshe Rabbeinu breaks the tablets and then pleads for the Jewish people, Moshe Rabbeinu is told by Hashem, Psol lecha shnei luchot avanim karishanim. Go out and hew out of the rock, of the stone, 2 new tablets. And he uses the same word psol. Psol can mean a pesel, can mean an idol. And psol means to hew out, to shape out, which was referred to the 10 Commandments. So it seems like such an inappropriate use of language that the word psol lecha, which is Moshe Rabbeinu's instruction to make 2 new tablets, something of the greatest holiness, would use the same word psol, which is similar to the word pesel. In fact, they related to form out, or to worship form. Why would Hashem use the word psol? There are other words in Israel, in Hebrew, that could mean the same. Why did Hashem choose the word psol, which so alludes to and it conjures in our mind the pesel, the golden calf, the idol? The Sfat Emes, one of the great holy Gerer Rebbes, said that the difference between psol and pesel is, where is the lecha? Where are you? When it's lecha, pesel, when everything is about what you are making of your life and you are the operative word and you are the one deciding, so then it's very easy to descend into form, taking on the connotation of an idol, because everything seems to be self-centered. It's all about you, what you want, what you desire, and what you attribute to be important. But if the word lecha comes after the psal, it's not what we decide to form. But Hashem says, go out and form the 2 tablets. Then the form is not an idol, because the lecha, the me, the I, the operative person is secondary to the instruction of Hashem. When it's lecha pesel, when everything is about me and mine and what I decide, so then we have a propensity to turn physical form into idols because we become so self-centered. But if we leave our ego second and we follow Hashem's instruction to make a form, that form can be holy. So where is the lecha? Is it before or after? Is it because of me I'm doing it? Or am I just there subservient to what Hashem wants me to do? Very deep thought. Maybe just one final thought about the Shema. When you say Shema next, take a look at the difference between the first paragraph and the second paragraph. Besides the fact that the second paragraph is much longer, you'll see that the first paragraph is written in the singular. Ve'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. And it says, B'chol levavecha, with all your heart, in the singular. And in the second paragraph, it says, B'chol levavechem, which is the Hebrew plural form of the pronoun. You in the plural sense. So that's one of the main differences between the first paragraph of Shema and the second, is the singular and the community. And both of these, we mention it so often, are so essential in our service of Hashem. The me, the I, the individual that's serving Hashem, and then the power of the cumulative effect of all the little individuals that join together and become a community. We need both. We can't just rely on the community, and we cannot certainly rely on ourselves. We recognize that there's the love of Hashem that is my personal journey, and there's the love and connection to Hashem that is the product of community, where we have these types and those types of shoyim and tzaddikim and beinim. We've got all different kinds, and they all form part of our people Israel. The bonds of community are even more powerful than our individual strength. We begin by talking about my heart and my love, and we end up in the second Shema talking about our hearts and our love for Hashem, all in the plural. I think it brings us to the record of to the top of the hour. So I'm going to unmute everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. You don't have to be muted. Have a beautiful, beautiful Shabbos and week ahead. And let us, please God, only know joy and happiness and simcha. Thank you. Thank you for joining.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Have a beauty.
God bless.
Shabbos, everybody.
Shabbos.
Goodbye.